Hi there. Welcome back to the Real Film Chronicles podcast. As always, I'm Nathan.
And I'm Brian.
And in this week's very special episode, we're going to be taking a look at a little film called Roadhouse.
Roadhouse 2024. Not Roadhouse 1989 with Patrick Swayze, right? This is a full-out remake directed by Doug Liman and starring Jake Gyllenhaal as Swayze's character, I think. The lead character.
Dalton.
This one just hit with Amazon Prime straight to I don't want to say straight to video, but that's basically kind of what it is.
Yeah,
right?
I think Doug Liman, I saw his post, whether I think it was on social media or somewhere online about I was really bummed. He wanted this to go to theaters. He thought it was his best work, and he was really, really proud of it. And there was something going on behind the scenes, and Amazon ended up releasing it straight to their platform instead of going to theaters first. So I know there was a little bit of behind the scenes drama with the director and Amazon there. So, but it did end up dropping directly to Amazon Prime and skipping a theatrical run entirely.
Yeah. It is what it is. I mean, I feel like I probably would not have gone out to see this in theaters if it went to theaters. So this is one where I'm kind of satisfied with its direct-to-streaming approach, but I'm sure everyone would be a little bit different. It would be kind of nice to see this maybe on the big screen amongst a crowd of people who are also kind of like into the movie, right?
Yeah, I think it might have benefited from the energy of the crowd watching it together, but I don't think that there's anything that you're missing kind of visually not seeing this on the big screen. It was not like I think it's a big screen experience really. Like in terms of like, we talked about Dune 2 recently, and like that's made for the big screen, but something like Roadhouse, I think if you watch it on your TV at home, it's like, I don't think you're missing anything in terms of, of the cinematic elements, but maybe you're missing out on the crowd energy, which may have contributed to or enhanced your viewing pleasure of this type of movie.
Yeah. Spoiler warning. If you're familiar with our podcast, we don't really hold back on spoilers right from the beginning. So consider this your spoiler warning. If you haven't seen Roadhouse, maybe go check it out and then come back to the podcast, or stay tuned. Just not like crazy spoilers in this movie. I don't think that we're necessarily going to get into, but before we jump into this movie, I thought it might be kind of interesting to just do a quick run through of Doug Liman's filmography. So I don't think I even realized old Doug here had made this movie until the movie started and I saw his name there. And I'm like, Dougie. Oh, Doug from Born Identity. I mean, to me, that's like the big movie. And Edge of Tomorrow. That's one of my favorite movies.
Or Live, Die, Repeat, depending on where you land in the title.
Yeah, that's right. That one got so messy. It's just brutal. But I didn't even realize this going back. One of his first movies was Swingers.
Yeah, I was surprised. I hadn't made that connection, right? It was it back with Vince Vaughn and Jon Favreau?
Jon Favreau?
I think it was like Jon Favreau, like their first film, wasn't it? I think that they had written, I think.
Let's do a quick check.
If only there was some way to check this, some kind of worldwide information network.
Yeah, Jon Favreau has writing credit. So that's probably one of his first movies, my guess. I mean, I think both of us loved that movie way back when.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's still a good one to go back to. It's kind of fun. He followed Swingers up with Go. I'm not sure if you saw that, but
I've never seen it. No, have you?
Many, many years ago.
Okay.
I have this odd memory of watching it, and I think some family were over, like extended family were over, and one of them came downstairs when I was watching it, and it was a particularly spicy scene on, like maybe the only really like inappropriate scene at the time. It's just like, oh, here we go. And found Sarah Polley, Katie Holmes, Timothy Oliphant.
Sarah Polley,
There's a lot of familiar names in there.
Yeah.
And familiar faces to check out. I think that one would be kind of fun to go check out again, honestly. Haven't seen it on Blu-ray or in stores in quite a while, so might be difficult to find. But then he went on to Born Identity. I mean, that whole movie speaks for itself.
I'd forgotten about that, but yeah, like the whole Bourne trilogy, even before, because like he did the first one, and then Paul Greengrass did the next couple. I think there was like the Jason Bourne, like 4 that came out a couple of years back. But like, yeah, like Bourne Identity is great. I love that movie. I love that whole trilogy, the original trilogy of Bourne movies. Right. But yeah, like that one's still like, I'll go back to that every couple of years, and it's so great on so many levels. It's an amazing little flick.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith with Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, when I believe, were they together at that time making that, or is that when they like discovered each other?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember the whole drama, but yeah,
we're not good with the behind the scenes
when they were together, or that's when they got together or something. But yeah, I don't know. Mr. and Mrs. Smith was kind of just okay for me.
And then Jumper, which I don't have as marked watch, but I feel like I must have seen that movie, or maybe it was familiar or similar to a different movie of like the similar genre at the time or something. But
yeah, I still haven't
Hayden
seen
Christensen
Jumper.
was in there.
Yeah, Hayden Christensen. It was like his first post Star Wars movie, wasn't it?
Very possible. I mean, that was 2008. In 2010, he did Fair Game with Naomi Watts and Sean Penn.
Yeah, have you seen that?
Have not seen that one.
It's actually it's a nice little flick. It's based on a true story. But yeah, definitely check it out if you haven't seen it. It's nice to see this on the list. I didn't even realize that was Doug Liman. I have it on my shelf. It was just like it was a blind buy, but it was really, really interesting to watch. You should definitely check it out. Based on a true story. I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, I definitely will. 2014, Edge of Tomorrow. Obviously, Tom Cruise. I feel like this is the movie you really got introduced to Emily Blunt. Everyone's fantastic in this movie. It's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
And then 2017 was The Wall, which looks like a war military film. I have not seen that.
No.
Aaron Taylor Johnson, John Cena. Small cast list, but after that, we have American Made with Tom Cruise again. Did you get a chance to see that one?
I still haven't, even though it's kind of it seems to be one of the budget titles on 4K. I still haven't actually picked it up.
I think it's worth watching. It's pretty good.
It's also
like
based on a true story as well, isn't it?
Yeah, true story of a guy who's like, I'm just reading the script here. He transported contraband for the CIA and the cartel in the 80s. And it's like, yeah, there's something interesting. It's one of those movies where you're going to watch it and then go read like a rabbit hole of Wikipedia articles on everything that actually happened. I don't know how true to reality it was. 2021, we have a movie called Lockdown. Anne Hathaway.
Never heard of it.
Haven't heard of it. It's pretty low rated, 2.3 on Letterboxd. Then we go into Chaos Walking in 2021 as well, which had a couple big stars. You have Tom Holland and Daisy Ridley, fresh off their MCU and Star Wars, runs. Mm-hmm. Did you see this one?
I haven't seen it yet. I heard mixed to bad reviews, so I wasn't exactly running out to see it. I think
this one,
is it based on like a YA novel, I thought, or I could be just making that up out of thin air.
Honestly, I was just about to say this felt to me like a YA adaptation, except everyone is a bit older in it. Like, you're not gonna confuse me that like Tom and Daisy are like 15-year-old kids in the sci-fi setting, but it does feel like it has that source material. But I mean, it was I gave it 2.5 stars for whatever that's worth.
Okay.
And then we're up to, there's a movie here called Justice, which looks more like a documentary of sorts over Brett Kavanaugh. Very few. It says 2023 with only like 50 people had actually watched this thing or logged it in Letterboxd. So I'm not sure what that is.
It definitely didn't get a lot of widespread advertising or anything, right? Like, it wasn't in the public consciousness at all, even though like that was pretty prescient given the recent state of U.S. politics, right? I'm surprised it didn't get more visibility in the kind of public dialogue.
Yeah. And that brings us to the 2024 remake, Roadhouse. This, I'm just going to be honest up front here. I did not see the original Roadhouse.
Ever?
I don't know if I lose any credibility. I've never seen it. I've only seen references to it. I think back like literally 20 years ago, there was a lot of like Roadhouse jokes and Family Guy, where it's just like that's where I was becoming aware of Roadhouse. And it was just one of those movies that I just never really bothered to go watch. Did you see it when you were younger, or is this more of a recent watch?
I did not see it when I was younger. I literally watched it 2 days ago when we were, I was on Amazon Prime and I saw, the new Roadhouse dropped, and directly below that on the menu I saw, the original Roadhouse. So I was like, okay,
yeah.
I'm gonna do this the right way. I'm gonna go back and watch the original one first, and then watch the remake to kind of, compare and contrast. Cause that's kind of fun, right?
That's pretty fair. So you will be our resident expert on the original Roadhouse. At least it's fresh in your mind, without any sort of nostalgia glasses on, which I imagine plays a factor into a lot of people's takes on that original Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze. We have no nostalgia for that one, I guess, in a sense. So we're
we're coming at this from a little bit different perspective. I know there's a huge discourse around the original Roadhouse. Some find it good, bad, good, so bad it's good. Some people would argue that it's one of those movies that kind of defies traditional kind of rankings on the good and bad scale, because it's such a unique beast. And watching it for the first time, I kind of starting to understand where this dialogue is coming from, and trying to figure out how do you rank this movie. It's one of those kind of campy cult hits, and for good reason, I think. But yeah, we can, as we talk about the new one, there's some things I want to compare and contrast and see how they approached, that kind of same kind of basic setting and character, and the changes they made for better or worse in the new one.
So I think I'll get started here with the standout of the movie for me is Jake Gyllenhaal. His character is actually really interesting. He does an awesome job. He's charismatic, and he's ripped all hell in this movie too, right? Like he's fit, which I feel like he's done numerous times for different movies, but like he's supposed to be a retired or ex MMA UFC fighter. And he certainly looks the part, and he's just this badass, who is really nice to people, but also really depressed and a complete psychopath at the same time. Like there's a few layers to him, I guess. I'm not sure how that compares to the original, like dude, like Swayze's character from the original one, but it seemed like this one, Jake did a pretty awesome job. And the rest of the cast was okay, but like didn't really stand out to me at all.
That was one of the things. Like Jake Gyllenhaal's great and everything. He's one of my favorite actors, and for good reason. Ever since I think really he came into my consciousness. I think we talked about this in Donnie Darko, and ever since then, everything I've seen him in, he's just killed it. He's had an amazing career, and he's one of those guys where no matter the project he's in, he's giving it 100%, no matter what, right?
Yeah, no, he does an awesome job. Is like he obviously did a lot of training for the role, like to get it in shape, but also doing some of the moves. There's a few flashback scenes where he's in the octagon, and those scenes are actually filmed during one of the UFC like live events, sort of like during different bouts.
So they actually got like a real crowd in there. So that's all.
They got the real crowd. You got the real announcers. You've got a real MMA fighter. He's like acting against in that fight. And so it lends a bit of credibility to it, I think. And when you see it on screen, it's like this is pretty legit.
And I think I was reading some interviews with Conor McGregor, who is a UFC fighter who appeared in this. I think it was his first acting gig as Knox, kind of one of the big bad henchmen in this, one of the main bad guys. I think I remember him saying, like, yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal was putting in the effort, and he was like actually like pulling off some of these moves himself. Like he's no slouch, right? It's like I wouldn't want to fight either. Obviously, Conor McGregor, But Jake Gyllenhaal either, he looked like he knew exactly what he was doing, right? He was like, he you could tell he put in the effort, right?
Yeah. Conor McGregor, I mean, he's one of the most infamous, I think,
Notorious
fighters coming out of the whole thing. It's just like, yeah, notorious, which I didn't want to say that because that's a nickname like he's really embraced and like uses, I think, in the ring. I don't think Conor McGregor is necessarily a good person, so I kind of rolled my eyes when I found out he's in this movie, but I understand why he would be in here, and I was very dubious on his acting ability. So I was pleased that they did not really expect him to act throughout this movie. Like, he basically got to play.
It was almost like a caricature of his like persona that he has.
Yeah.
Like, I think I'm not a huge. I enjoy watching UFC and fights and stuff, but I don't like follow it religiously. It's like I know who Conor McGregor is just in passing, and I heard. I'm not going to delve into like all his background and stuff. It's like, let's just say he's not quite as unsavory as people make him out to be, but he's like not like, yeah, he's not like a stand-up dude either, right? It's like, we're not here to pass judgment on Conor McGregor, partially because he could, beat the living tar out of both of us with one hand tied behind his back. But yeah, in the movie, I think they played to his strengths, right? It's like he played this kind of over the top, gregarious, larger than life, arrogant character, which really felt like it was like it felt like Conor McGregor was in his element there and having a blast with this character. And it was a little bit odd, some of his mannerisms, but I think it worked for me. It didn't blow me away. Like, I don't think he's going to get nominated for an Oscar, obviously, but it didn't like detract or distract me from it didn't take me out of the movie that much. I know some people like, oh, he's terrible and he's bringing the movie down, but it's like, honestly, it was fine. It was fine.
Well, I think there's a certain craft to it where you're going to bring someone in who does play into the theatrics of MMA fighting.
Theatrics.
But
maybe that's a good
so
way
he
to
has
put
some
it.
experience in that regard, and you can understand like some of the stuff outside the ring, like, when you're trash talking people, like it helps play into like an acting thing. But I think the director here and the crew making this kind of know what he's able to bring to the role and are able to bring the other actors in to kind of match it. Like, there's some silliness throughout the movie that doesn't just belong to him. And one of my favorite characters was the kind of one of the henchmen at the beginning who
In the biker gang there, yeah.
in the biker gang, who's just like kind of like, oh, this guy like seems pretty realistic. It's just like when Jake's character Dalton asks him before he lays the smackdown on him, is like, where's the nearest hospital? And like the main biker guy's like like brush it off. Is like, this guy responds, well, it's actually like 25 minutes away. And the rest of his gang like get upset at him for
super
like
helpful,
responding to the questions legitimately.
Because there's a group of like kind of gangsters, kind of gangbangers on motorcycles, a little motorcycle gang, and they're terrorizing this bar, this roadhouse. And the one dude is just like, he seems super helpful and super nice, and it's almost like there's like he's like, I remember like there's a fight later on, and he's like carrying like a chair to smash over somebody's head. He's like, oh hi Dalton, it's like, good to see you again.
and the final encounter with that character, like he basically comes clean to Dalton because Dalton is like on a rampage at that point, and they're kind of alone. He's just like, I just wanted to ride my motorcycle around, and I got involved in this gang, but it's like, they're not good people, but I just want to ride. Yeah. And it's like, that's probably pretty reasonable. It's just like, who are you going to ride with? But I think having characters like that help bring in Conor McGregor's energy and stuff and help sell the world that they're in. Like, there's a lot of like funny things. And Dalton himself, Jake Gyllenhaal's character, is pretty funny throughout the movie too. He's like, just the way he approaches conversations, and he's all smiles all the time. He brings a lot to the world, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Conor McGregor was fine. I feel like all the other actors, I don't know what it was with this movie. All the other actors were fine, but they felt like they were reading lines on a page as opposed to getting involved in the world. Aside from like Jake Gyllenhaal, really, everyone else felt a little bit flat. I don't know what it was. I think part of the reason, for me, that, this new Roadhouse didn't work as well as the original 89 version was because this one, like, kind of tonally, I don't think it really knew what it wanted to be, whether it wanted to be like super serious. Cause like you said at the beginning, it's like, oh yeah, it's got this, tragic backstory for the main character. And he's like, it's shown like, oh, he's suicidal. That never really comes up again. Sometimes there's like these really funny over the top moments. It's a fight it was a little part in the fight at the end where Conor McGregor is banging Jake Gyllenhaal's head against the piano, and Jake Gyllenhaal makes some kind of quip. Is like, oh, this piano sounds like it is out of tune. And Conor McGregor's like, oh, it sounds fine to me. And they keep going. It's like little there were little like moments like that were kind of dumb, kind of campy things, but they didn't really play into that. So it was trying to be serious. There was a couple kind of campy, silliness. There was a little bit of humor. There was a little bit of this and that, and never, for me personally, just never found its footing in what it wanted to be. And I think that's reflected in, some of the actors. I don't think it's their fault. It's just like, I think they were kind of doing the best.
They don't know what they're
could.
playing towards, right? Yeah,
exactly. They don't know what kind of tone they're aiming for, and so like it's almost like they're trying to play it in like something in this safe zone where they could edit it together and it could be anything, and it ends up being kind of nothing. And it was a shame because it was really like the whole idea, and I love the character of Dalton. Both Patrick Swayze and Jake Gyllenhaal's taken him. I like this idea of like, and like in this one, like they made it super obvious. They called it out as like, oh, it's just like a Western where the stranger comes into town to clean up the saloon. It's like, okay, so there's no subtext at all now. We're just going to state the themes and stuff out loud. State the subtext becomes text.
Yeah, like he rolls into town.
Yeah.
Sorry, finish your thought there.
No, I was like, the only thing missing was that little girl literally turning to the camera and giving like a wink to the audience. Like,
yeah,
we can figure this. Like, it was just, I don't know. There was some weird stuff like that in there. It's a shame.
Yeah, when he rolls into town, and that's the bookstore owner, the father and his daughter working there, and it's like they seem like some of the only sane people, like regular folk in there, but she is so like almost fourth wall breaking, as you said, where it's just like turn to the camera and it's like, this is like a Western movie, like literally saying Western. I remember seeing I'm just going to bring up Batman Begins here, Nolan's adaptation, where they're talking about in the movie version, they don't go see a movie, they go see a play, right? And it's like
the opera, yeah.
And in different versions, it's just like you don't want to have the characters go see something that they're in. So you have a different mediums that play. So here, instead of saying, oh, this is like a Western movie, I know I'm watching a movie, and now she knows I'm watching a Western movie with her in it. It's just like there's this weird meta stuff going on. If you would have just said, oh, this is like a Western book, and maybe rhyme off an author from before because they work in a bookstore, maybe bring up a book or something that is relevant to the story that's happening here, that would have played out a lot better than just saying this is like a Western movie. She works at a bookstore. Why not bring up a book?
If you ever read The Gunslinger by Stephen King, is like hint, hint, nudge, nudge. It's like get the gunslinger in there. It's like, okay, there's subtle ways to do that. At the same time,
she's like one of the only like nice people in the movie that I don't know. It's just that one really threw me for a loop, and it was like it makes you feel weird when you're watching it.
Yeah, what they really needed in this was what's really missing, I think, maybe in Hollywood in general, is like you're seeing this kind of generation of character actors starting to die off, both figuratively and literally as they're getting older. But like really, like you look at the first Roadhouse and you had like a slew of great character actors. All the characters felt like they were quirky, but they were real people with different arcs, and you grew with them. And this one, the 2024 version, just felt like, I don't know, there was a weird everything. All the actors it felt really, really flat in terms of like they didn't know what tone movie they were in, right? It's like, it was super frustrating because there's some good talent in there.
And talking about some of the other actors and their characters, like the girlfriend didn't feel like they had a lot of chemistry, like they were sort of a bit flirty, but it didn't feel like it built well, so that, when it's time for the climax and he thinks she's kidnapped and she is kidnapped and all this stuff, it's just like I don't know, he's a man on a mission, but like he didn't seem that invested in her to begin with. Yeah,
so in the original movie, there's a lot more buildup between Dalton and the doctor. I can't remember her name in the original, but you see them going on dates, and they're having conversations and they're getting to know each other. And it's like, oh, your relationship, there's a lot more time spent in the relationship. And somebody pointed out, is like that first movie was just, man, it's crazy. Cause like Patrick Swayze had this, there was this magnetism about him. You watch him on screen, he's mesmerizing. He just had this sexual energy about him. Like that movie was super charged. There's one scene in the original movie, it's just ridiculous, where he's doing like this Tai Chi kind of exercises by the lakeside. And this old dude with his beard who he's renting a room from, he just comes, he sees him, and he's just the way he's looking at him, and he kind of runs his hand through his hair. It's like, is he impressed with him? Is he turned on by him? It's like, but you just can't help you're drawn in just by like Patrick Swayze's pure sexual charisma. There's a certain energy around Patrick Swayze that just like, it was so unique to him. And Jake Gyllenhaal's a great actor, a very different vibe though, right? He can make it work for him. He could have made it work in the context of this movie, but like that, I don't know, like Swayze, he just fit that time and that place in that movie so well. And there's like this sexual chemistry between him and that doctor. And this one, I think they have two conversations and then they go out and they have a date on that sandbar. And it's like out of nothing. And it's like, okay, sure, I guess. It's like first you hate him and now you're dating him with your ex-boyfriend's boat. I was like, I don't know. Like, were there some scenes that were cut? That's what it feels like, really, in terms of their relationship.
And talking about like the length of the movie, if there was stuff I was cut out of this that needed to be in there, like this movie was borderline too long to begin with. It was basically 2 hours solid. I think I had paused the movie because one of my cats was needing my attention, and it said there was 45 minutes left. I'm like, 45 minutes?
Yeah,
I feel like
right.
I've watched a complete movie already.
Yeah.
And so much happens in that last 45 minutes too. I was just like, I feel like I kind of checked out a bit at that point. I was a little invested in it. It was just getting too much, too ridiculous for me to handle. And I want to talk about for a moment, like the job for Dalton to come in, like this, the bar owner.
Yes.
She hires him at $5,000 a week. Okay. So $20,000 a month to bounce this place. I don't know how long she plans on employing him for, but I'm thinking it probably would have served the character better to offer him a low amount of pay, stay in this rusty old houseboat that like barely floats. And like, this is a way for him to maybe redeem himself by helping other people, a way for him to like deal with his past, but he's getting paid a lot of money. And maybe, I don't know how much people at these bars make, so I could be way off base here, but like $5,000 a week, he's getting paid in cash. Like, he's doing pretty well for himself. He beats up some dudes with no issue. I don't know.
Well, I think she was going to hire him. I think in the beginning of the movie, she said she wanted to hire him for a month. So it was essentially a 20 grand for a month's worth of work. Just, she wanted him to come and clean up the bar. So this is watching the original movie and then this one. So this is where I felt like they lost a little bit in terms of the character developments of Dalton, played in this one by Jake Gyllenhaal. In the original movie, Dalton, played by Patrick Swayze, he is he refers to himself as a cooler, but what he is, he's more than just a fighter. So in this one, he's in the original, like Patrick Swayze, he's kicking butts, taking names, he can take care of himself, but he's a total package. He goes in to clean up, and he's not just fighting and bouncing guys. He's like, he's helping clean up the entire operation, right? He noticed that one of the bartenders was skimming off the cash register, so he had him fired. Like, they're having problems with distribution because like the evil villain controls like the liquor flow into the town. So like, like Patrick Swayze's character Dalton has he has connections to bring in liquor from somewhere else. He's helping to hire new people. He's firing staff. So he's brought in not just as a bouncer, but he's brought in as like a whole, like essentially like he's managing that bar to bring it up to speed. So in this one, Jake Gyllenhaal's Dalton is brought in only for his fighting skills. So he's only brought there to beat people up. And so you feel like, what else is he going to do though? He's going to beat a bunch of people up. But like Patrick Swayze was like, he's not like, I'm not a bouncer, I'm a cooler, but he's managing the entire operation to bring it up to speed. And you see the bar over time, the Double Deuce, which there is a little bit of an Easter egg when he gets like the restaurant right next to the bookstore is called the Double Deuce. In the original movie, the actual Roadhouse name was Double Deuce. But you see, like over time, it's like it's getting cleaned up. Originally, like the the musicians had the cage around them to protect them, and then by the end of the movie, that cage was down. You see like nice neon signs, and like the place was getting fixed up. Where I felt like this Roadhouse it ended up worse off at the end after they hired Jake Gyllenhaal. So it's like it was really weird. It's like, yeah, he completely wrecked the bar and everything, and then he left town. It's like, well, this doesn't. It was really, really weird, and it felt like it took something away from the character of Dalton. Yeah, it was an interesting choice. It felt like it made him less dynamic. It was like he was just a guy who fights, as opposed to
that's
somebody
interesting
who's like,
to hear about.
Yeah,
because it sounds like he's a lot more like a lot more useful towards their situation. It's just like here, like you said, he's only a fighter, and he only he's drinking coffee at the bar all the time. That's all he does until fights break out. And in this one, he's actually training the other bouncers at the bar, and will let them handle things first. And if things start to get out of hand, then he steps in.
Yeah, that element is taken directly from the 1989 version, where he's also like he's working with the staff and the bouncers. Like the whole thing with him, he was training them was like, be nice until it's time not to be nice, right? It's like if a guy calls you a name, it's fun. You be nice, right? You always take him outside. Like, so there's another element too, is like you take the fighting outside, right? You never fight in the establishment. So like Jake Gyllenhaal getting the guys outside at the beginning, like that the biker gang out, is like that was all in keeping with the original character. And like that when he goes in, like when Patrick Swayze goes into the Double Deuce the first time and he's just sitting there drinking coffee, that's taken from the original one too. Is like it was drinking coffee, just kind of watching. He's calm, he's cool, he's collected. I think like that part of the character, which I love. Jake Gyllenhaal had that nailed down. Where it's like you never see him rattled until the very end. Like he's always kind of calm, cool, collected, and he's like that idea. He doesn't say the line, but he's like, yeah, you be nice, you be polite. It's about de-escalation, right? He's like, you want to try and keep things as calm as possible. If you have to fight, it's a last resort kind of thing, right?
So how do you feel about this Dalton being a straight up murderer? Like halfway through or 3/4 of the way through, he goes to fight a henchman. He just tags him in the throat, and the guy suffocates and drowns. And he doesn't just leave him there. Like he brings the body around to do stuff with it. Like, was that a little like going over? To me, that was like, oh, I kind of like that he's truly a psycho here, but like surely he must face some like consequences from this.
Yeah, because in the 2024 movie. Spoilers again, he's a UFC fighter, and his whole controversy is in the ring. He's fighting this dude, he's fighting another fighter, and he kills him in the ring, right? And he goes overboard. He knocks him out, and he still keeps punching him when he's down, right? So he's going kind of overboard. Like there's something unleash the beast, right? And then at the end of the movie, he walks up to the guy and he punches him in the throat and collapses his trachea, which is a nice reference to the original movie where like Patrick Swayze rips the guy's throat out.
What?
Wait, literally. Yeah, you gotta watch this movie.
Like Rambo style?
Yeah. But so, spoilers for the original movie. What happens is his tragic backstory that's revealed is that apparently he killed a man as well. He killed a man in self-defense. Turns out he was sleeping with this woman. He didn't know she was married, and her husband, in a jealous rage, came to attack him with a gun. And he killed this man in self-defense. There was a trial and everything. And then in this movie, like the original movie, he does end up killing this one kind of main henchman who's like the analog to Conor McGregor's henchman. He's somebody with like Dalton, background in martial arts, knows how to fight, knows how to handle himself. But he doesn't just like out of the blue, like they're pushing him and pushing him and pushing him. But it's in the middle of this fight with this guy, like they're in the heat of the moment and they're fighting, and he doesn't plan to go up and murder this guy. They're fighting. It's kind of like self-defense because he like pulls a gun on them at one point. Is like the bad guy's starting to lose the fight, pulls a gun, and then only then when he's in like that kind of life or death situation, then he kind of instinctually disarms him, beats him up, rips his throat out, and kind of dumps him in the water. But it's not like in cold blood, right? It's all this idea is like it's middle, like it's passion of the moment. You're in a life or death situation. It's kind of kill or be killed. So there's a build up, and you feel this like, oh yeah, he was. If you almost feel like his kind of Zen persona was him. That was his way of kind of dealing with, oh yeah, like I got out of control and I killed this man, so I need to keep myself calm, keep myself collected. But you see, it's in the heat of the moment. It's like, but in this new one, Jake Gyllenhaal's not in the middle of a fight when he kills this guy first, right? He's calmly, coolly, like a psychopath, walks up, punches this guy in the throat, and just watches him die, and then like carries his body around and everything. Goes out and gets ice to keep the body. I'm just like, this is really. All of a sudden, they turn him into a psychopath. I was like, all the nuance of like, oh yeah, guilt over killing a man is like, oh, he didn't feel guilty about killing a man. He just like he was kind of a psychopath in this one. It was a really bizarre shift when that happened as compared to the original, where there was like, at the end, he does go kind of full action hero and he kills a couple more guys when he goes to confront the main bad guy. But it felt like he was being pushed and pushed. And there's no other alternative. Where it felt like in this one, like Dalton's like a cold-blooded killer. It was really weird.
Yeah, so the henchman that he just collapses the dude's trachea, that felt like just straight up murder. All the other, when he goes full action hero, that's a good way of putting it, because it turned into like almost generic action movie on the water.
Yeah.
All those killings are fine because it's like they are really like you're in the thick of battle, self-defense, whatever. But this one, I mean, he had a plan for this body and he was doing stuff with it. And what really got me is at the very end, he finally, after a huge fight with Knox, Conor McGregor's character, the sheriff shows up and was just like, you know what, Dalton, you helped get my daughter back. I'm going to cover for you everything that just went down. So, maybe just leave town and that's it. And I'm like, what? And right? I'm thinking, it's like, okay, at least put him in cuffs and like have him force like a consequence and like repercussion for killing one dude. All the other ones are fine. Even earlier in the movie, the guy comes at him with a gun. He gets him overboard, and like a crocodile or alligator eats him and kills him. But, it's like,
but he's still trying to save him. It looks like, right?
He's trying to save him,
pull him up. Yeah.
So why is he just in cold blood like murdering these other guys? Because he's gone into psychopath mode. And then the other element of the sheriff just saying, "I'll cover for you," is the entire motivation of intimidating and bullying the Roadhouse owner and the patrons was that they want to tear down the Roadhouse and build a resort. And this lady will not sell the Roadhouse to them. But they've shown me multiple times in the movie that this entire criminal organization is protected by the sheriff, and the local police are very corrupt, and they are willing to murder people, and they're willing to burn down via arson. They burn down the bookstore. Why not just do that to the Roadhouse? You clearly don't care because you have all these protections from law enforcement. Why not just burn it down and kill the owner of the bar? I mean, it's grim, but we need a movie with plot in it. But it was like, if you're going to let this guy go off scot-free for murder and all this stuff, he just needs to leave town. Why did you just take care of business earlier?
Right. Well, and then like the sheriff too was shown to be like half an hour earlier. He was about to shoot Dalton in cold blood after his cops that he had presumably on the take. They arrested him. And he was like, who's just going to shoot him on the dock there? And it goes to like a full 180. Like, he'd been working with this dude's father, like the bad guy. I can't remember what his name was. Ben Brandt, played by Billy Magnussen. Again, and like, so the whole thing was Ben Brandt's father was running this, he was a quote unquote legitimate businessman by day, but also he was I guess he had kind of run out of money, and he was dealing with some unsavory characters to get loans to keep his dreams afloat, because he wanted to like gentrify the island and put up big resorts and stuff. Yeah, but then like, so this guy's been working for this guy's father for decades as a corrupt cop, essentially his enforcer, and all of a sudden at the end he just was like, oh yeah, no, you're fine now. I'll let you go. Get out of here. I'll protect you. It was like, what is happening with this character? It feels like two different characters or two different cuts of the movie that got mixed together, right? It was really weird.
I saw one review where they mentioned that the bookstore owner and the daughter had a vested interest in making sure that these villains get what they want, because the bar is just like full of violence and craziness, and it's like it's obviously bringing the entire area down. It's like if that bar went, they would benefit directly from the increased tourism, that a resort in that location would bring to the whole area. It's just like, that'd be a boon for the economy. It's like, are these people, they're clearly villains, but it's like, are they really that bad? They are trying to help out. What was the name of the town here? Key Glass or something?
Yeah, it was the Glass Keys, I think.
Glass Keys, yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing too. Like in the original film, you saw like the bar itself was getting fixed up because like the bar owner in that one, he had said he'd come into some money recently and he wanted to fix this place up. He thought it could be something special. And you see that over the course of the movie, it's literally getting renovated. You see like the clientele changes where it's like, oh yeah, the kind of the regulars and the all the people who are bar fighting, they're not in there anymore. And then you got lineups outside of like, oh yeah, people are coming here, like look, having a good time, and it's safe and it's clean now. And you don't get that same trajectory in this movie of like, oh, the bar is getting better. It's like, no, it's still exactly the same as it was, just with like one less biker gang around. I mean, when Conor McGregor came in, when his character Knox comes in and like goes kind of full tilt psycho, and he starts wrecking up the place, and all of a sudden like one of the other patrons is just like, bar fight, and he punches his buddy presumably in the face and just beside him. It was like completely illogical, but then the whole place erupts and everybody starts fighting everybody else. It's like, oh, the clientele hasn't changed. They're all the same jerks who are going to start like fighting each other at the drop of a hat, as opposed to the original where it's like, oh no, Dalton actually made a difference. He helped clean this up, right? It was like, okay, they got rid of the clientele. It was like they would come back a couple times in the movie. It was like, yeah, it was like one of the running kind of gags, but it was really effective in the original one. Was that when he goes to this little town to help clean up this bar, Dalton has like a Mercedes, but he keeps that hidden, and he buys like a beater car. And you see him at the beginning of the movie, he gets his beater car, this old, I can't remember what make and model it was, like $500, $200 car, and he goes and buys some extra tires and he put them in his trunk. It's like, this is really weird, because he knows every night during that first stretch, he comes out and like his tires are all slashed and there's like a stop sign through his window and stuff. So every night he has to go out and essentially change all his tires. And so he keeps going back to this mechanic. He's like, yeah, do you want to buy them like in bulk, or do you want to just, it's like, no, I'll just keep paying as I go. Cause he knows like people see him drive up, they're going to go out and wreck his car. But then by the end of the movie, you see he's like, oh yeah, he can drive his regular Mercedes up there, his car up, and it's not getting wrecked anymore. Right. So it's like little things like that show, oh yeah, there's improvements, as opposed to like the new one where it's just like, yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal's just going to beat up another guy and show off some really cool moves and some like joint locks and different throws and stuff, and show off cool MMA style action. But like you don't get the sense that things are getting better, really. I don't know. It was really weird.
And I think we alluded to it earlier, but by the end of this movie, a boat is driven into the roadhouse and a car is driven through the wall of the roadhouse. So the roadhouse is closed down for quite a while afterwards. Like, they are having a rough, hopefully insurance will pay out a little bit here, because he gives all the money that he recovered from the bad guys to the bookstore people, which I think was nice.
Which
I'm not.
It was nice, but also super stupid, because like all the bad guys in the drug cartels that presumably they were hinted at giving that money, they're just not gonna like. That's marked money essentially, right? It's like he's essentially dooming those bookstore owners. Like when the mob or like the local cartels come in to look for their money to see what happened, is like they're gonna kill that bookstore owner and his daughter, because like they have all this cash that's clearly from them.
Oh,
he just doomed that little girl. She is dead functionally at the end of that movie.
It's grim. I mean, when you're talking about, I kind of wish I had seen the first Roadhouse now, because. Or the original Roadhouse, because the way you describe it, it's like, this seems like it missed the mark on a lot of things like that. And just having the Roadhouse be improved throughout the movie would make so much more sense than what happened in this iteration of the Roadhouse saga. One other thing we do need to talk about here is the fighting, because the fighting is front and center, right? Like, this is one of the big selling points of the movie. Jake is jacked up. He's doing moves. He had lots of training. You bring in like a title holder like Conor McGregor. He's a beast.
He knows what he's doing. You can tell.
Apparently, what they've done is, I don't know if they developed a new method, but they've done a different technique of fights where every point of impact and contact is a CGI body double. So it helps. Really? I'm saying this with air quotes. Add to the realism of like, you know what I mean?
Irony.
Where like normally a movie, like you watch the old Rockies, it's like clearly they're swinging. It's like they're half a foot away or more from their opponent. They're acting like they're getting hit. This one, you see a lot of contact being made. And every time you do, you're apparently seeing a CGI double of that person making contact. And when you're watching the movie, it does feel a little weird. And I couldn't put my finger on it until I started reading these reviews. And I read an article about it afterwards. It was just like, oh, they went hard into using CGI in this movie. So now I can see I did look up the budget, but the budget probably blew up because of this. And maybe they sort of suffered on some other elements like character development and script and whatnot. But I don't know, like, how'd you feel? Did you notice the sort of the jankiness of that fighting, the CGI in this?
No, I was going to say actually, like, the fighting was probably the strongest part of the movie, and they were right to kind of sell the movie on the fighting. Like, I thought it was pretty well done. It was easy to follow everything. The whole movie had kind of like a polish to it. It felt a lot cleaner. I think that's a symptom that a lot of kind of modern movies fall into, where like, they're trying to polish everything and make it look as good as possible, as opposed to like, no, like in real life, things don't look, it's never that clean, right? The clean lines, but like the fighting itself and the moves, I was watching, to see like how they're fighting and everything. Like that first fight when Jake Gyllenhaal is like slapping all the guys. I don't know. I thought that was really well done. Cause like, and also on the side note, like, yeah, people always like talk about, slapping is like if you hit someone, whether it's closed fist or open fist, as hard as you can, it's not like a slap is not like a love tap. A slap, you can slap literally living daylights out of somebody. So like it was good to see like that kind of open hand strike being used. And it's like, yeah, somebody could slap somebody and knock them right the heck out. So I thought it was really good. And I thought I liked that, Dalton, same as the original version, where he was, he would go in and use kind of, for the most part, until he got pushed too far, was like using the exact amount of force that was needed. There was a couple of cool scenes where like one of the patrons would pull out a knife and he would come at Dalton there, and Jake Gyllenhaal would just kind of grab him and like use like a simple joint lock on his kind of wrist and maybe his elbow, and disarm him. And it's like, okay, he's not hurting him anymore than he has to. He's just doing enough to disarm him. When he breaks the guy's fingers, when he pulls the gun on him, it's like, you can't, like, once I break your fingers, like that gun is useless. Like it's not super intimidating. Like I was always talking to the guys, trying to talk them out of it, right? That gang at the beginning is like,
he gives them all a chance to like go.
It's like, yeah, is your insurance paid up? I was like, no, like seriously though, do you have your insurance paid up? Is there a hospital? He's even like talking to the bar owners, like, can we call him an ambulance or something, or can I borrow your car? And there's like a nice humorous beat at that beginning where like after the fight, he takes them in the car and he's driving these guys he just beat up to the hospital. And just like that whole idea of like the gentleman, kind of it goes back to like the idea of the cowboy, right? So you have this kind of person who has this code of ethics where like he'll beat people up, but he's got this code of honor, right? Until the end of it, where he goes full psychopath in this one. But it was nice to see, at least for 90% of the movie, they had that the character elements kind of continue over from the original Dalton.
Just a slight aside, when I'm watching this and he starts slapping people, as you described earlier. Yeah. The previous night to watching this movie, I had finally, with a couple friends, watched that Winnie the Pooh horror movie. I think it's called Blood and Honey.
Oh yeah.
And in that movie, there is a scene, and hopefully this is not a spoiler for the movie. If you're going to check out this scary movie or this horror movie on Winnie the Pooh, you're going to do it regardless. There's a scene where Pooh, like Winnie the Pooh himself, just slaps people dead. And it's just like, there's literally a scene like Roadhouse where he's surrounded by people, he's slapping them. The exact same thing happens in Blood and Honey, where he's surrounded by a group of dudes and he just turns to each one and just slaps them across the face. I mean, one of them I think ends up losing their face because it's Winnie the Pooh. He's powerful. He's
got
he's
claws.
A bear.
Yeah, he's a bear.
Right? But it was the same kind of energy in Roadhouse. I'm watching. It's like, oh man, the slap energy is strong in these movies right here.
Yeah, but I don't know. To me, getting back to your original question, I thought the fighting was really well done. It was really well choreographed. But now that you mentioned all the CGI in there, if I watch it again, I'm not going to be able to unsee that. So thanks for ruining one of the
It's a thing where I thought it looked a little weird, but I am willing to, like, when I'm watching it, I'm willing to say this is a stylistic thing happening here. Like, I know they're not actually making contact. I don't know how they're doing it, and I'm not thinking about it. I'm sure some CGI was involved. It didn't really bother me that much because there is style to the choreography of how you shoot these fight scenes. That's kind of what I'm focusing on. I did like the kinetic camera, like the movement of it. We're not getting a ton of different fast cuts. The camera is fast though, and maybe a bit too fast sometimes.
Yeah,
and I find now there's like so many crazy camera movements that I think it's a result of cameras going digital and getting smaller and smaller. So they're able to I picture somebody holding the camera who's like very physically fit, like almost an acrobat here, able to like jump around the set with these guys fighting, like jumping around them and like moving in ways that don't necessarily feel natural because we're coming from a lifetime of watching movies filmed on probably 100-pound plus cameras that are very mobile, right? And this is like just another advancement in the mobile quick camera, which can be good or bad. It's all a different style. And this one was fine for me.
Yeah, there's a phenomena in recent movies of like the quote unquote the floating camera that like sometimes it takes you right out of it, right? Because it's an unnatural movement that the camera can't be there or the camera can't do the things it's doing normally, right? A lot of it's like the CG stuff with like I think the Corridor Crew was doing a comparison of like Pacific Rim and Pacific Rim 2 and talking about like how do you get that sense of scale, and I was like you can see like by having the camera placed at kind of ground level, or the camera's going where like typically a camera can go, or from like a human point of view, as opposed to the camera going kind of all over the place and crazy, getting some cool shots, but you start to lose that sense of perspective and that sense of scale. So I think that's a phenomenon of a lot of modern movies. But yeah, it was nice to see also that Jake Gyllenhaal, especially at the end when he was fighting Conor McGregor there, he was getting some he was taking some hits and he looked pretty beat up at the end. Although it was an interesting choice in the updated version to have Dalton's character be immune to stabbing. It was an interesting creative choice. So like it was also pretty handy that his main opponents used stabbing weapons against him, which was his one, strength. It was like impervious to stabbing. You could stab him anywhere, and apparently it doesn't do any damage to internal organs. So that was a nice little superpower that he had.
It is funny because he gets stabbed at the beginning of the movie. He doesn't take it out right away, which is the smart thing to do because it's going to start bleeding. He takes it out. He puts duct tape on it. Duct tape resolves a lot of issues. But even at the hospital, he starts bleeding again, and she's like, "We got to like stitch that up." He's like, "No, just put a bandage over it. It'll be fine." And then he gets stabbed in that final fight, almost in the exact same location.
Which was really weird too, right? It's like, why did they stab him in the exact same spot? It's like, oh, we already have the makeup there. Just stab him there again.
It was very, very strange. And honestly, even when he goes, he starts stabbing Conor McGregor's character like multiple times. I'm like, you're kind of losing me in this fight because I can tell these are like CGI daggers of wood that they're stabbing each other with. It's just like,
yeah, and it kind of took away from the character of Dalton. In the original movie, it was always him like. Even when he got his hands on guns, he would kind of toss them aside and go back to hand combat. It was always like he would be able to. Sometimes it was a prolonged fight, but he could always he won that way. Whereas this one, it felt like he could only win essentially by kind of quote unquote cheating in the fight, where he's like he couldn't beat Conor McGregor until he started stabbing him. I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. It's like I would have rather him taken him down kind of on his own terms and like have the other guy kind of be cheaty McCheaterson, and he wins by not cheating and kind of not using weapons and sticking to the hand-to-hand stuff, right? I don't know. It was a weird turn when he beat him at the end. I wasn't a huge fan of that, how he won that fight.
And then there's a mid-credits scene where we see Conor McGregor's character is escaping from the hospital and beating everyone up, and I'm like, give me a break. Just
somebody
let him
just
die.
watched the Fast and Furious movies with Jason Statham's character there, right? It was the first thing I thought when they introduced that character of Knox, and he's like walking around butt naked. That's also a reference to the original. Patrick Swayze went butt naked in the original. But he goes in and he's like, oh, he's gonna steal this guy's clothes, and it cuts, and all of a sudden, like the whole little market's on fire, and he's walking away with that guy's jacket. That was like, okay, somebody just watched. I think it was what, Fast and Furious, like maybe 6, where Jason Statham's character is introduced, and he's at the hospital there, and it's all on fire. It pans back to show that the whole hospital's kind of been ransacked by this character, and it's like, I don't know. It was kind of tongue in cheek, but again, the movie was totally inconsistent. So it was like, okay, if the whole movie had kind of been like that, it would have been more sense. Like the original was like, it took itself seriously the whole way through. All the characters were super serious, but like the whole thing was so super campy. It's a world where, bouncers are essentially celebrities. Like people are like, you know who that is? That's Dalton. It's like, it's some kind of bizarro world. Where like,
well, he even makes mention of that. He's just like, why does literally the next day he's like, why does everyone know who I am? They all know my name. And it's just like,
yeah,
it's because you're in a movie.
Yeah.
Like the little girl talking about the Western movie. She told you earlier, you're in a movie. And that's why everyone knows your name now.
She even updates the genre point. Now it's a mystery Western.
That's like, right. She updates it later on.
Oh my God. Why are we still here? Why are we doing this? Kid sidekicks almost never work out. This is not great.
Any other elements, any positives or negatives that you walked away from before we jump into some ratings of this film?
I think we touched on most of it. The bad guy, Ben Brandt, was his name. I don't know. He didn't feel particularly bad or bright. Like when he went in, like I don't know what his final plan was, right? He's like, he goes to face Dalton in the bar, and he's like, well, I can't intimidate you, obviously. I can't bribe you. But then he brings up his backstory about how he killed this guy in the ring and then walks away. I'm like, what is that supposed to do? Like, I don't know. You're supposed to like he's so.
It's not like he can use that as leverage because it's a public event. Everyone knows that this happened.
Yeah. So
everyone knows Dalton is out there.
Because he's like, let me give it one more try, because like Conor McGregor's character Knox was called up by his father from prison because his son was messing everything up with his empire. So like, and he talks to him at one point, right? Ben Brandt talks to Knox. He's like, let me try, before you go in and wreck up the place and kill this guy, let me go and try it my way. It's like, well, what was your way supposed to be? Like,
yeah,
there was nothing there. So I don't know, it was weird. Like character motivations were kind of weird, and you didn't really get to know the bar staff. You got to know a couple of the bouncers a little bit, but in the original, you really got a sense of all the bar staff, and you saw the little character arcs. One major element I have to point out that was missing from the 2024 remake of Roadhouse that was in the original, that was, I think, was a huge missed opportunity. I think it was a huge thread that they should have kept in. In the original movie, there was a character played by Sam Elliott who was another cooler like Patrick Swayze, and it was a mentor of Patrick Swayze. And at one point, when things are getting so bad, because Patrick Swayze's like, yeah, things are going to get way worse before they get better, because he realizes like, oh yeah, I pushed these guys around, I kicked them out of the bar, they're going to hold grudges and they're going to come back. So it's like, yeah, because people are like all the people working at the bar are like, oh yeah, you kicked those guys out. It's like, don't celebrate yet. There's a ways to go before they come back. So things get so bad. Sam Elliott's character, his mentor character, comes up, and that adds a whole new dynamic. With you had this mentor, you had this older, the older kind of character doing the same job that he was doing as a cooler, who'd like go in and clean up the whole bar, not just the bouncing part, but like, the actual management of the place. And to have that mentor in there, to have somebody from the old days, from back home, that he could kind of bounce off of a little bit, to see, he had a bit more swagger than Patrick Swayze. He wasn't as kind of zen and stoic. So you saw, it was almost like seeing like a different version of a Jedi, right? It was almost like the Qui-Gon Jinn, where like all the Jedi were kind of like, they were one way, and then Qui-Gon Jinn comes in and he's a bit of like a loose cannon. It's almost like this order of bouncers. And Sam Elliott was like this kind of the kind of like the kind of cool uncle who comes in. And that was a real missed opportunity, I think. And I think there was a huge thread that was dropped in this one where he didn't have that mentor character to kind of come in and ground him and to give him some, like, there were some really great dramatic beats. And, you know, spoilers for the original movie, but one of the things that sets him off, like in this movie, it's like, okay, his girlfriend of a couple of days is kidnapped, but not really kidnapped. Cause he kind of sussed out this, like, yeah, it was like the cop came to him and was like, oh yeah, my daughter's kidnapped. He's like, yeah, sure she is. Like, of course it's a setup. But in the original movie, like they killed Sam Elliott's character, spoilers. So like his best friend and mentor was murdered. And that kind of sets him over. Like, it's like, okay, now I'm going to go and face down against the bad guy, right? You could see, like, there was clear motivation, clear personal stakes in this. And that was kind of missing in this. There was no personal stakes. At one point they asked him, like, why are you sticking around? Like, what do you have? Like, what are you doing here? I belong here. Like, I think Ben Branther, the main character, is like, what are you doing here? Like, why don't you just move on? And I was like, as an audience member, I was like, that's a really good question. What the hell are you still doing here? Like, why are you still in this fight at this point? Right. Where the original movie is like, okay, yeah, they straight up murder his best friend and mentor. And so all of a sudden he has this kind of personal stake in this. And it was just, there was a lot more for all the campiness and cheesiness of the original 1989 version. You know, a movie that could only have been made in the 80s, right? It was that kind of specific brand of cheese and camp, but it was also earnest. And, you know, this movie, it couldn't only been made in 2024, if that makes sense, right? It's not like a movie of its time, right? It could have been made 10 years ago and it felt exactly the same. It feels, I don't know, it feels kind of unmoored, to use a, you know, nautical term. It was appropriate for the setting of this movie. But there was no heart in this one. It felt, you know, it was in the 2024 version, that is, there was no, it didn't have to be campy or cheesy, but it could have picked a direction and gone with it. And I think there's a couple kind of major plot threads that, you know, were disregarded. I assume in the interest of kind of streamlined storytelling, but it really then you pull on one of those strings and all of a sudden, like, motivations don't quite add up. Plot points don't quite add up. It's like, you know, there's a myriad of things that happen. You pull one of those threads and the whole thing kind of comes loose. And that's kind of how I felt about this one.
Fair. We should talk about ratings. Unless you have anything else to add.
No, I'm good. You've been listening to me talk for so long. I'll give the listeners a break here.
So normally we talk about ratings from around different sites, Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb, Letterboxd. Afterwards, I want to put it before our own ratings. So
okay.
Play along at home as well. I'm going to ask Nathan what he thinks the average is, because he never looks this stuff up, so he doesn't know. No. But he's going to guess, so you guess at home as well. The Rotten Tomato critic, out of 100%, what do you think the Rotten Tomato critic rating is for Roadhouse 2024?
67%.
It's very close. It's 63% on this one.
Oh, okay.
And how do you feel the Rotten Tomato audience rating would be here?
I think it's going to be higher on this one. I'm going to say 75.
Switch those two numbers around. It's 57%.
Really? I thought for sure this is one where, like, the audience would far outweigh the critics.
Right?
Huh.
Because you would think people would probably, like, I'm thinking nostalgia at the very least, but now after
100%.
listening to you talk about the original Roadhouse, and, like, it clearly sounds like the better movie, right? So it's like, oh, surely it must be rated lower. But IMDb uses 10 out of 10. What's its users average on Roadhouse?
I'm going to say a 6.4.
Very close, a 6.2.
Oh.
And bonus round, what's the original IMDb? What is the original movie's IMDb rating?
Oh, I don't know, 7.7?
6.7.
Huh.
So they're very, very close. 6.2 for the new, 6.7 for the old, which is kind of interesting. No, it's not.
Yeah.
Letterboxd. It uses the 5-point scale. What do you think the Letterboxd users have? And keep in mind that I think Letterboxd is like a little more Like this is a recent movie and it's a little more susceptible to like recent movie bias, I think. I'm not trying to lead your score in one way or another, but what do you think?
Okay, I'm gonna go higher than I thought then. I'm gonna do like a 3.3.
Ooh, you're too high. It's 2.7.
2.7. Damn it, I was gonna go like I was gonna go closer to that.
See, I think this is a case where normally it would be higher, but I think it's getting rated lower because people are seeing this and it's fresh, and people are also watching the original Roadhouse and thinking this is not nearly as good. I've seen amongst the people I follow a lot of very low stars on this one. The original Roadhouse, what is its Letterboxd average?
Letterboxd? I don't know, like 3.7, 3.8.
It's a 3.4.
Okay.
So there's definitely a lot of favorites. Definitely a lot of more people enjoying the original one than this new one, but it's still a pretty fresh release. But I don't suspect that's going to climb too much. Now, those are all good and everything, but the real ratings are our own. These are the ones that really matter. So I got to ask you, to remind everyone, we use the 5-star system with a bonus like option, which mirrors the Letterboxd rating system. What is your rating on Roadhouse 2024?
Yeah, I've kind of been going back and forth. To me, it's like a 2.5 to 3-star movie. I've been kind of erring close to 3. It was for me, this is kind of like a right down the middle of the road kind of movie. It was fine. It was not as terrible as people say, but it was not, like, as Doug Liman has said, is like his best movie. His masterpiece for me still remains Live, Die, Repeat, or Edge of Tomorrow, however you want to call it. For me, a phenomenal sci-fi movie. Maybe I was kind of lightning in a bottle, but for me, that's a 5 out of 5-star movie. So like Doug Liman can do really well. Like this Roadhouse remake, with all due respect, I can see exactly why Amazon didn't make a push for this in theaters. This feels exactly the kind of direct to DVD, direct to video kind of remake, where it just doesn't have the heart and soul of the original. So I'll be generous and end up at a 3. But like to me, that's it's a middle of the road kind of movie. It's not love it or hate it. What's your overall rating for this, Brian?
I was going to give it 3 stars. Mm-hmm. I would love if I could give something 2.75 stars, because this would...
Yeah, 2.75.
I think I'm in the same boat as you.
Yeah.
I'm kind of surprised you didn't go 2.5.
I might. I don't know. I actually haven't entered it yet in Letterboxd, so I'm still...
That's right.
Still up in
By the time you listen to this,
why.
We might have completely different ratings on our Letterboxd.
It's a 5!
But yeah, I enjoyed watching the movie. I didn't think it was bad. It was competently put together. It was weird reading afterwards that Doug Liman was saying it's like some of his best work. And I think he was calling out Jake Gyllenhaal's performance as some of his best work too. And I'm like, I understand hyping up your movie, but come on. I mean, we talked about his filmography before. There's a lot of stellar films that he's done before. This is not even close to a lot of those movies, but it's still a fun movie. It's entertaining. You can pay attention to the plot. You don't have to. You just wait for the fighting scenes. There's a lot of gorgeous scenery. I think it was filmed not actually in Key West, but somewhere tropical. I mean, it looks gorgeous. It looks the part. There's a lot of, action. I mean, I'll just keep going back to the action. Like, I mean, Jake, he's charismatic too. I mean, he's good presence on screen. Evo's character is kind of a psycho. And I mean, after hearing about everything from the original Roadhouse, maybe if I had actually watched it, maybe this one would get rated lower, because everything you're telling me before makes so much sense that this one does not make any sense in.
No, and the original Roadhouse is, it is what it is. It's an obvious product of its time. It is cheesy and it's campy. People are being like super serious, but for some reason, if it vibes with you, it vibes with you. It's one of those, like, I understand now why it has this kind of cult classic status, and people are kind of laughing at it, but they're not laughing at it, but they're almost like laughing with it, right? It's like a loving thing. It's almost like the phenomenon with like The Room, not in that it's so bad it's good, but that it's so It's such a unique movie, and I've been struggling to rate this one as well because it defies rating, right? It's like it's beyond that good and bad spectrum. It's beyond like this. It's not so bad it's good. I don't think it defies those kind of ratings, right? It's a fun movie, but it's got like the heart and the soul, and my God, the sex appeal. I mean Patrick Swayze. He was a great actor all around, but like. Just looking at him, it was like every character in the movie just like wants to be with him, and it's like, yeah, like you understand why there's just like this sexual charisma, and they played it up incredibly well. And like you were saying, like Jake Gyllenhaal does a great job in this movie, but you want to see some great performances by Jake Gyllenhaal. Go check out his work with Denis Villeneuve in like Enemy and Prisoners. Check out his work in Donnie Darko for some like top tier god level performances. Right? It's like he did a great job in this, but like. I don't think this was like a career-defining performance.
Yeah. And the supporting cast, too, was just kind of meh overall.
They were there. I couldn't say anything really good or bad about them. This new Roadhouse 2024, it's one of those things. I hesitate to use the word soulless because I know people put so much effort into this, but like whatever the spark the original had, this one just didn't have that spark. It felt like an exercise, and and trying to make it more kind of modern and more edgy, trying to make, he's a UFC fighter now, which is like, okay, sure, that's like a more kind of modern, it sets it in a different time period, but for whatever reason, it just didn't feel like it had that kind of that spark or that passion behind it. Starting with the script onwards, it was just like we said, it's a perfectly fine movie. It's one of those, if you're folding laundry on a Sunday afternoon, you need something in the background, throw on Roadhouse 2024 because you can kind of watch it with one eye or out of the side of your eye and not miss anything really. If you want to watch this for essentially Jake Gyllenhaal's abs, you're not going to be disappointed. But if you're looking for the next kind of cult movie experience that's going to inspire people, generations from now, like the original Roadhouse, I think you'll be sorely disappointed.
As always, we appreciate you hanging out with us today and taking the time to listen to our podcast. You can find us online over at realfilmchronicles.com, where we have not just a repository of podcast episodes, but many of our written reviews as well. If you're up to it, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram as well. All the links should be within the show notes here. So until next time, take care of yourself and others, and be sure to enjoy your film journey.